Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St.Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus. In April 2025, the government of St. Kitts Nevis launched the Medicinal Cannabis Authority to carefully manage the development of a comprehensive, well-regulated medicinal cannabis industry that prioritizes public health, safety, scientific evidence, and of course, economic opportunity. Now, today we'll be exploring the science behind medicinal cannabis, the policy framework guiding its regulation, opportunities for farmers and entrepreneurs, and the authority's vision for the industry over the next several years. Joining us for this discussion is Navid Mills, the new Chief Executive Officer of the St. Kitts Nevis Medicinal Cannabis Authority, as well as Dr. Machel Emanuel, researcher in the Department of Life Sciences at the UE campus in Jamaica, and he's also a consultant to the authority here in St. Kitts Nevis. Stay with us for InFocus as we will be sowing the future of medicinal cannabis in St. Kitts and Nevis.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us, and of course, allow me now to welcome our first-time guest. It's always exciting when we have first-time guests here on InFocus. Dr. Emanuel, as we mentioned, of course, you're a researcher with UE and you're a consultant here to the authority, and also Mr. Navid Mills, and you're the new CEO of the St. Kitts Nevis Medicinal Cannabis Authority. Yes. Let's start off our discussion with a brief introduction, gentlemen. Tell us, Mr. Mills, we'll start with you as a CEO. Tell us a bit about yourself and your professional background.
Okay, thank you. So, my name is Navid Mills. I grew up in a very close-knit family in the St. Peters area. During school times, I was a sportsman. Football and track and field were my two things. I excelled in both and was able to compete at the national level. After that, I ventured to the US, where I attended college in Georgia and studied healthcare management. Studying healthcare management allowed me to build a passion for quality and data analytics. I was able to use this throughout my career. But upon graduation, I wanted to get into the cannabis industry. However, I thought it would be very creative if I could start a business supplying cannabis-related products instead of medicinal cannabis itself. So that was my first, stint in the medicinal cannabis industry. After that, I moved back to St. Kitts, and then I started working at the biomedical research facility as a data manager. There I was able to build my skills in analytics and regulatory compliance.
Dr. Emanuel?
Yes, well, I'm an academic at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. I'm a university lecturer. I teach in the area of crop science, horticulture. I have conducted numerous research projects looking at cannabis-related work. I have graduate students looking at different aspects of the cannabis value chain, such as microbial contamination, looking at the sustainability of cultivating cannabis in in the humid tropics. We have done tremendous work looking at policy integration. How do we integrate social equity programs? How do we maintain quality assurance standards? I was the one who wrote the Bureau standards in terms of quality within the cannabis value chain in terms of Jamaica. I also, in 2022, when the volcano erupted in St. Vincent, we actually donated 10,000 cannabis seeds to help with the restoration of the medicinal cannabis program. And I have managed to engage in international collaborations such as bio-based organics, looking at organic fertilizers from a sustainable standpoint. And we have also collaborated with the Humboldt seed company coming from like California, which is one of the largest genetic companies supplying cannabis genetics globally. So we have managed to create a network, a niche that is able to support the region's development in terms of moving forward in terms of cannabis policy.
And so, Mr. Mills, let me come to you now, because of course you mentioned that when you left college, you sort of, it was more or less an introduction in your field in terms of to be able to sell medicinal, cannabis-related products. Of course, there's still a bit of a taboo about the use of marijuana, and some question really if it can have its medicinal benefits. Yes. How does that gel with you in terms of what you did in the United States and how the environment here is now in St. Kitts Nevis?
So I think back then it was much more taboo. That is why I took that approach to just engage in supporting products and not going full-fledged into selling medicinal cannabis. But now, especially with the early advancements in the region, many jurisdictions already have an industry. Barbados, Antigua, Jamaica. I think that it's much more relaxed, and I think the opportunity is ripe now, especially when we have such learned individuals like Dr. Machel Emanuel, who can really steer us in the right direction and take this industry where it needs to be.
So tell us, Dr. Emanuel, what brings you to St. Kitts Nevis at this time?
What really brings me here is the urgency to be able to roll out the medicinal cannabis program and to really bring about the sustainable economic commerce and the viability of the industry within the inception of its rollout.
You use the term urgency. Mr. Mills, perhaps, Dr. Machel, perhaps you could clear. Why did you use the word urgency?
Urgency because the bill was passed in 2022, and we understand that there is a public sentiment that there is not much happening within the rollout of the cannabis licenses. So we see the eagerness of the public to get engaged in the licensing process to be able to develop the sustainability of the value chain. So we see the opportunity presenting itself where Mr. Mills spoke of like St. Kitts Nevis is the 6th Caribbean country to develop an authority to regulate cannabis. So we even seen last month where Grenada is engaged in cannabis policy. We even see Dominica getting on board. So all the Caribbean countries are uniquely poised to integrate within the global medicinal cannabis framework. So I see the opportunity presenting itself for St. Kitts and Nevis to get engaged from that sustainable standpoint.
Mr. Mills, give the comment?
Yes, the general public is restless, for lack of a better word. It's been some time we've been speaking about this. All the necessary steps, the Cannabis Act is in place, the rules and regulations is in place. So now is the time for us to build out this industry.
Now, the last time I had a discussion on medicinal cannabis, the Attorney General, the Honorable Garth Wilkin, was here, as well as Ms. Jan Williams. I think she's a member of the board. And they indicated that at the stage, and we're going to talk a bit about where things are at currently, but that there was the opportunities for persons to go out and to come in and indicate their interest to whether it be to supply whatever services in that area. And again, we'll discuss that some. But there wasn't that movement from the general public in terms of being able to take advantage of that. You weren't here at that time, but there seems to have been some hesitance. I'm not sure if persons were unaware or they just were not sure. So how is that going to be overcome by your department, your authority, I should say?
So we thought that it's best to bring the information to the people. We're now making, as far as the Cannabis Act, the rules and regulations available online and physical copies. The office is now open. We are asking anyone that is interested to come down and begin the process. We also will be conducting a series of town halls and cultivators meetings so that we can meet everyone that is interested, see what challenges, hesitations they are facing, reservations that they have, and we addressing them head on and see how we can help them to move forward.
Right, because the office has been open for some time, but of course it's the impetus is on persons who are interested to step forward and get the information and take action if they see it as something that they would be willing to contribute. And of course the farmers as well, that's very important. You have to start at that level. But before we get into that a bit more, let's talk a bit, Dr. Emanuel, perhaps you can help here. I want you to differentiate between the use of using cannabis for recreation and for medicinal purposes. All
right, sure. So I will start from the ground up. So all higher organisms, including fish, reptiles, birds, mammals, all have an endocannabinoid system. And that endocannabinoid system facilitates homeostasis, right? So it creates a balance in your involuntary mechanisms, such as your sleeping cycle, your appetite, pain, so on. So in a world that we live in today where people don't necessarily sleep well, don't necessarily eat well, and do have illnesses or conditions that is based on lifestyle preferences, cannabis can assist greatly in resetting those involuntary mechanisms to assist in sleeping better, eating and consuming food better. So the fact that medicinal cannabis presents an alternative to the conventional medicines that are out there with less side effects, research has definitely demonstrated that directly and indirectly, cannabis can improve the human being in a very significant way. So in terms of looking at recreational cannabis does not take the elements of maintaining a properly quality assurance, public health and safety standards in administering a therapeutic substance to the wider public. So it's important to ensure that you start off on the right footing to ensure that the public understands the connotations of medicinal cannabis and what it takes to ensure public health and safety and environmental stewardship through agricultural production. We know the ills and negatives of agricultural production, such as use of highly hazardous pesticides, over-fertilizing, eutrophication of water systems. So to manage the ecosystem surrounding cannabis to ensure that sustainable production, manufacturing. So to support the entire value chain is something which is complex, from cultivation to manufacturing, processing, retail, dispensing, and to also support the auxiliary companies that will support that value chain, such as the fertilizer companies, the pesticides which are to be used. So it's an opportunity also to reset the agricultural sector and to encourage the younger generation who seems to have a much interest in terms of cannabis to allow them to participate in a value chain that could have that economic sustenance for the future.
And Mr. Mills, of course, the legislation, while marijuana was decriminalized, I think there are a lot of persons who are still confused, even though there's been so much promotional materials out there. I know the Attorney General always encourages persons to go to, if you need more information, Cannabis Clarity, SKN. That is something that was created here, a website that was created here, and is available for locals to get a proper understanding of the legislation and what are the do's and don'ts. But the legislation clearly makes it, outlines in terms of that while marijuana was decriminalized, still the regulation, the recreational use of it, it's not encouraged.
Yes. Yes, so as of now, the only way for you to engage in commerce as it relates to cannabis is through the medicinal cannabis framework. There's sacramental use, which is permitted, freedom of consciousness, where you're allowed to possess up to 2 ounces of cannabis and grow 5 plants, but that's for personal use. You cannot sell these products. If you wish to engage in commerce as it relates to cannabis, you have to begin the process, fill out an application form, and then get licensed to finally operate a cannabis business where you can grow, transport, test, manufacture, import, and export cannabis.
If I may also add to that, we all know that ganja has been an integral part of Caribbean culture, and it's been popularized through visual and performing arts. And we understand that the persuasive use of cannabis within Caribbean demographics does present some sort of challenges, particularly with the adolescent brain. Mm-hmm. But it is also prudent to understand how like do we fuse that integration of the medicinal cannabis, the Freedom of Rights Act, from a sacramental point of view to understand responsible use of cannabis from the wider public. So although the nuances may not be presented, it is also prudent on the regulated framework to ensure protection of the consumer and the adolescent mind.
So why do you think medicinal cannabis is becoming so popular that it's becoming much less of a priority for so many countries in the region?
Well, I always say that you can't go to the shop and buy happiness, but you can buy cannabis that could change your mood and make you feel happy. And to see what people are going through in their day-to-day lifestyles, it does present an opportunity for that therapeutic benefit to enhance the human's perception and well-being in their day-to-day movement of their working life, such as I mentioned previously, the ability to sleep well, to eat better. Cannabis can present that opportunity for persons who struggle with certain conditions, particularly when we look at certain medical conditions such as cancer-associated symptoms with like nausea. Cannabis presents a great opportunity with much less side effects compared to the conventional drugs. And we even see recently that the United States descheduled cannabis from Schedule 1 having no medicinal benefits to now Schedule 3, where medicinal benefits are not recognized. So we even see the global movement from the United Nations classifying CBD as a therapeutic product, which is a derivative of the active compounds from like cannabis. So in keeping with the global movement, it is essential for the small developing island states to integrate within the global medicinal framework to have that competitive advantage and to create that investor confidence, which could definitely contribute to economic development.
Were you surprised to see that move being done by the Trump administration?
Well, I am not moved. It's a move in the right direction, but it's not really much at the end game because it does not necessarily transcend down to the actual consumer. So even if cannabis is descheduled, it still remains federally illegal and it's regulated by the FDA and the DEA, and it's still under the Substance Abuse Act. So although it presents opportunities for research and universities to explore more opportunities in terms of cannabis research, and it also provides for the larger companies to be able to get some tax breaks, but it does not filter down to the average farmer, the average consumer. So it's a move in the right direction, but we still think there is more that needs to be done. But from a Caribbean point of view, we see that that move will also create that consumer confidence based on our tourist market entering the regions, show us to be able to patronize cannabis in a more freely and opportunistic manner.
Mr. Mills, can you talk to us a bit about the authority's current mandates as it stands and the progress achieved to date in developing a regulated cannabis industry here in St. Kitts Nevis?
Okay, so currently our mandate is clearly expressed in the Cannabis Act 2020, where it speaks to the establishment of a medicinal cannabis authority whose responsibility is the establishment, regulation, and monitoring and full control of a medicinal cannabis industry. In this medicinal cannabis industry, patients with qualifying conditions can receive, has access to safe, fully regulated medicinal cannabis.
And one of the greatest challenges that we see, because the medicinal framework within the region has been set up based on conventional medical pharmacopoeia, it makes it very difficult for the medical fraternity to accept cannabis as a medicinal product, seeing that it's going to be locally cultivated, locally extracted, and locally formulated. And that presents a challenge based on the conventional mechanism which is associated with the pharmaceutical model of prescription drugs. So we understand that the agencies such as the Ministry of Health does have an overriding role to play in the success of the regulation capabilities of the authority. So the support mechanisms from the various agencies and ministries are going to be very prudent in terms of rolling out the medicinal cannabis regulated framework to available to the wider public.
Do you think that it makes a difference, because you mentioned the fact that it's local? Do you think that the fact that it comes from local, when I say local, I mean within the Caribbean?
Yes. And yes, it does, because we have been known in the region to have traditional healers and herbalists, and they have never been able to get themselves formally within the region's medicinal framework. So that presents a huge limitation in terms of access to therapeutic drugs which come from herbal products, and that has been looked at. But with now the access of or the inventory in terms of medicinal cannabis, that actually presents a great opportunity to integrate our holistic healers, therapeutic practitioners into the normalized framework to be recognized based on training, certification, formulation, dispensing herbal products generally to the wider public based on safety mechanisms.
And so what would you say, and this question is for both of you, are the key elements of a strong medicinal cannabis for small island states much like St. Kitts Nevis?
Key elements for
a strong medicinal cannabis policy.
Okay. So the key elements for a strong medicinal cannabis policy is one that is encompassing of especially the marginalized groups, the Rastafarians.
Yes.
One that empowers the people, the locals, because that is a very big thing for us as the authority. And then ultimately to make sure that safe cannabis that is of a certain quality that we can replicate multiple times over is on the market.
Yes, and any cannabis policy reform must take the framework of three pillars, right? And the first pillar is the ability to create a medicinal cannabis program with patient-driven access to medicinal cannabis products, and to develop a social equity program where people who have been victimized, marginalized, come from communities that have higher incidence of arrest, to be given the opportunity to actually participate within the regulated framework, and to facilitate religious and ceremonial freedom for the Rastafari community who has been patronizing cannabis from inception. So those three pillars is the hallmark of cannabis policy reform in small developing island states. And it is important because the value and the success of cannabis reform is not going to be measured by the amount of license which are generally made or given out, or the amount of money received through applications, licensings, but the social restorative justice aspect on the wider population, where somebody feels freer to practice their religious freedom, and someone can now make that distinctive choice to purchase cannabis from a regulated space that meets public health and safety standards. So it really changes the perception in the wider public in terms of how cannabis has been perceived to where the globe in terms of its integrating in terms of the global cannabis movement, but also to ensure that the protection of the minorities such as the adolescent mind is very rigorous and prudent based on supplying cannabis from a regulated standpoint.
Mm-hmm. And so give us a sense then, if you can, and in terms of where we are as a region in terms of cannabis regulation and decriminalization. You've done a lot of work in the region.
Yes.
Tell us a bit about where we are as a Caribbean.
Yes, so as a region, the Caribbean region is uniquely poised to take advantage of cannabis commerce because of our cultural heritage and the market brand capabilities in the international market space. Also, the sustainability of cannabis production in the humid tropics presents an opportunity which first world countries don't necessarily have, based on going through various seasons. We have the sunshine 365 days per year, so the ability to utilize the solar radiation to grow cannabis in a sustainable manner, where we see in the United States more than 1% of the energy grid is into cannabis production, and that does not facilitate a sustainable standpoint based on the carbon footprint which is currently being used. So the Caribbean region presents an opportunity to present cannabis from a different marketable standpoint, such as eco-friendly, organically grown, sun-grown, sun, and see associated with that brand. So I think once the Caribbean is able to unify based on certain parameters, because what we see is every country has develop policy in terms of their own unique opportunities, but not necessarily integrating the region to facilitate intra-regional trade. And we see currently where intra-regional trade is one of the lowest currently. So cannabis research has shown cannabis is probably the most intra-regionally traded horticultural crop and catches the highest economic value in its raw state. So the opportunity that presents itself to develop another economic pillar, just like bananas did in its heyday, could actually reset the Caribbean region in terms of that opportunity towards sustainable development.
Now, of course, countries that have decriminalized marijuana and are moving towards that way. There is Jamaica. You mentioned that you've done some work there.
Yes.
Dominica. I think Grenada recently had some legislation moving towards
decriminalization. Yes.
Right. And so, Mr. Metz, if you can talk to us a bit about that alignment between the local policy here in St. Kitts Nevis? Because, of course, we're a step further in terms of Grenada, certainly.
Yes.
We would have had that legislation done before. And the best practices, both regionally and internationally as well, that come into play with the authority.
So the authority is using the experience that many of these jurisdictions have already built. That's why we have consultant Dr. Emanuel here with us. He had a part to play in all of the rollouts of these medicinal cannabis industries. So he's basically able to tell us all the pitfalls, the issues, the problems that arose. For example, Barbados might be one of the closest industries to ours, how it is administered. And we see there that there are some not desirable outcomes, and we're just observing these things and seeing how we could shape our industry so that we don't, hit these pitfalls as well. I don't want to say exactly, what some of these things are, but I'm just saying we are aware of what's going on in the region, and we want to make sure that we build out our industry so that it can be as successful as possible.
Yes, and one of the general concerns that the general public generally faces is the aspect of foreign direct investment into the cannabis sector. And it is a serious concern because what the people of St. Kitts and Nevis has gone through in the past based on prohibition, they definitely want to see that the public, the local public, is there to benefit from the management and stewardship of the cannabis value chain. So although foreign investment is very much welcomed, which will set the pace for employment, job creation, infrastructure development, technology, we also want to see the opportunity presenting itself for the local Kittitian public to be able to be part of this industry in a very meaningful way. And one sees it as the opportunity where one could work within the cannabis sector and have a viable income to maintain their livelihoods.
Mr. Mills, let's talk a bit about now the local opportunities as was just mentioned by Dr. Emanuel and yourself. Because we established it earlier, because there are a number of licenses that are available that persons can apply for.
Yes.
But before we do that, we're going to take our first and final break because I want to get as much in. Stay with us, viewers. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us. We continue our conversation with Mr. Navid Mills, who is the CEO of the St. Kitts and Nevis Medicinal Cannabis Authority, and Dr. Machel Emanuel, who is consultant here to the authority. Of course, he works with the Department of Life Sciences within the UE campus in Mona, Jamaica. All right. So, Mr. Mills, let's talk a bit about the opportunities that exist, and we want to break it down. So, farmers, researchers, entrepreneurs, and entrepreneurs would cover businesses as well. And we understand, of course, that there is some tie-in. Talk to us a bit about that.
Okay. Currently, there are a variety of licenses available for the general public and foreigners as well. There's a cultivator's license, there's a transport license, a testing license. We have an extraction and manufacturing license, as well as import and export, and then a dispensary license.
Break down each of those categories, if you will.
Okay. So a cultivation license allows you to legally cultivate cannabis, and a transportation license allows you to legally transport cannabis, a manufacturing and extraction license allows you to legally extract the chemicals, CBD, THC, and other cannabinoids from the plant. That is to make oils, for example, hash, batter, and different concentrates. And then when you want to use that extract now to put into different byproducts, creams, shampoos, gels, sprays, tinctures, that's what that license will permit you to do legally. And then there's a license to import and export license. It speaks for itself. If you want to bring in medicinal cannabis from other markets, Canada, Europe, you would need such a license. If you want to export to these markets, you would need the export license. And then finally, if you want to sell cannabis from a retail storefront or even wholesale, you would need a dispensary license.
Yes, and if I may just expound a little bit, like, because the Caribbean countries, including St. Kitts, is a signatory to the 1961 International Narcotics Convention, the government has an obligation to engage in submission of reports to the International Narcotics Board of Control on a monthly and annual basis. So that facilitates some level of compliance that needs to take place within the regulated space. So I just want to make it clear that I know that farmers have been doing their thing, breeding, growing, selling cannabis, but in a industry that facilitates compliance and regulatory framework, the ability to own the entire value chain, it's something that is not necessarily prudent in its reality, right? So I urge these traditional cultivators to develop their skills and to see where they could fit in on the value chain to make a sustainable income via applying their trade, whether it be growing, whether it be trimming, whether it be extracting, compounding, infusion, so on, right? So develop your trade and allow yourself to be able to sit somewhere along that value chain that would allow you to participate, because the success of a cannabis business or a cannabis operation is not the mere fact that I can grow cannabis or I have been growing cannabis for the past 5-10 years. It's the ability to manage a business and engage in an industry that requires some level of compliance.
And Mr. Mills, you spoke about that the opportunities are available for local and foreign investment, but I think I would want to make the point that and it was clearly specified that local involvement will always be given priority. I think the foreign aspect of it comes from areas where we may not have the capacity, for instance, research. So talk to us a bit about that.
Yes, so the authority, the local first mindset has been built into the Cannabis Act itself. The registration fees for these licenses, 50% for locals. Foreigners have to pay 100%. So from the legislation itself, we're already thinking about locals and finding ways how we can empower them. We would also walk locals through the entire process, the application process. We're having meetings with them. They have first contact, they can call, they can come in at any time. They have privilege. We want to really build out a strong local network of providers and business people in the space. And then where we drop short, then we think that the foreigners can come in and provide some service there.
Yes, and I have done some extensive work looking at the foreign direct investment within the cannabis sector, and we have seen both the positives and both the negatives coming from foreign investment. For example, Jamaica, when like Canada decriminalized or legalized in 2018, the investor confidence was pretty high, and we saw a lot of foreign direct investment coming in from like Canada. But post-COVID, when 47% of cannabis LPs signed for bankruptcy, that presented a huge challenge based on the cultivation, the manufacturing, processing, and the prospects of that continuity of foreign investment coming in. So that presented certain challenges, and then we have seen where the foreign investors may forge partnerships with local business communities at the expense of cultural leverage and artisanal production. So there needs to be a balance between how do we manage the investment capital coming in terms of the cannabis sector, and I foresee the opportunity presenting itself in terms of providing certain services that would facilitate access to international markets from more so a public-private partnership rather than just the foreign investors managing the entire service providers, such as radiation of cannabis products to enter international shores, such as certain genetic protocols, breeding, molecular diagnostics. Some of those things will definitely require that investment capital to kickstart, such as testing, infrastructure, so on. So we welcome the foreign direct investment, not at the expense of the local population, but to create a harmonized model where the foreign investor benefits and the local person also has a solid place within the marketplace in terms of ability to generate economic commerce.
And so, Mr. Mills, the importance of getting this message out to persons who may be interested, or to the general public who may not be aware of the opportunities that exist, it's important to, I believe, take the message on the road.
Absolutely.
I believe that's something that the authority is doing.
Yes. Currently, through Dr. Emanuel's visit, we have already planned a series of engagements, both on St. Kitts and in Nevis, where we can meet firsthand with anyone that is interested. And as I said, the invitation is always open. If you are interested in medicinal cannabis, come down to the office. It's on Princess Street, right across from Boosie's. Come in, have a conversation, begin the process. It is a long process. The sooner you start it, the better.
And Dr. Machel, what's your advice for persons to get involved? Because, of course, you have the experience of working and seeing what happened in Jamaica and in Dominica and other countries as well, too. But what's your advice? And you spoke to it some in terms of mentioning that the cultivators, for instance, they must recognize that value. So what are some of the strategies that you would share with the authority to mobilize?
Yeah, some of the strategies is pretty much to organize yourselves, and to educate yourselves in terms of what regulated medicinal cannabis is and what part that you could play within that supply value chain. It does not necessarily have to be from a product standpoint. It could also be from the support linkages from auxiliary companies such as the fertilizers, the pesticides, the packaging material. So there is an opportunity for everyone, but you just need to be able to strategize your role and your niche within the market space. So whilst the opportunity presents itself, the applicant also needs to understand the role that they can play in terms of developing that sector and moving forward. So we will be engaging in a series of public consultations, and we have met with both the public and private sector, and it's important to really emphasize the role that each ministry, government, agency, and local private sector would have to play to ensure the success of an industry that could really be one of the economic pillars in terms of sustainable income, both from a local commerce and a foreign currency standpoint.
And of course, economic diversification, Mr. Mills, that is something that the government has prioritized, and of course,
Absolutely.
especially within the agricultural sector.
Yes.
Of course, the Minister of Agriculture is also the Minister of Small Business and Entrepreneurship.
Yes.
So there's that unique tie in there as well too.
Yes.
Yes, and for the local Kittitian also, there is social equity avenues that you could get into the industry with less barrier at the entry compared to a foreign investor and a local investor. So I urge you to explore these opportunities to be able to participate and contribute to economic development in a meaningful way.
I'll touch on that. Economic development, economic diversification, job creation. Tell us how that can be done.
So once we have the build out of all these licenses, we anticipate that we can have hundreds of people every day waking up and being able to ply their trade legally, safe, and in a regulated market. This is a huge industry. The opportunities are vast. And we, the locals, are the ones that will push this forward. As Dr. Emanuel says, you play a major role in shaping this industry, but it will be determined by your works, your investment, your commitment to your trade.
Yes.
So we as the authority will do as much as we can to facilitate this through training and providing any partnerships, facilitating any partnerships with regional and international businesses. We'll do whatever we can.
And Dr. Emanuel, perhaps you can provide some background, because of course you've seen it done in other countries. So tell us a bit about how that has worked to spur the economy and create jobs.
Yes, and we see that Germany particularly has the largest registered medicinal market globally, with more than 1 million cannabis users using cannabis as a therapeutic substance. So the fact that St. Kitts has direct flights to like Europe, and the urge to meet that demand and supply, there is an opportunity that presents itself to export value-added products. We don't envision we want to export cannabis buds and flowers, but the preposition of value-added commodities entering international markets and creating that niche entry into the market space with the marketing prospects of sun, sand, and sea does present a credible opportunity, particularly the fact that these countries cannot grow sun-grown cannabis, but we have the opportunity to market cannabis from a different standpoint, using connotations like sun-grown, environmentally friendly, organic. So we see where the global consumer is willing to patronize and pay higher money for products that meets those ethical and moral standards. So I see the opportunity presenting itself for the region to really participate. And I also see St. Kitts being a regional leader in terms of rolling out their medicinal cannabis program and integrating and facilitating intra-regional trade by developing products that would create that sustainable demand for usage within the therapeutic and nutraceutical industries.
Where do you see St. Kitts and Nevis being uniquely positioned to become that leader?
Based on the policy review that has been set, so because St. Kitts is not the first and is not the last one, but the opportunities and the mistakes that have been presented via previous administrations. For example, Jamaica was the guinea pig. So we have 10 years of data to really show what has happened within the cannabis value chain based on how licenses have rolled out from cultivation to manufacturing, the investment capital coming in, what is being used for, the investments taking place in the testing, regulatory sector. So being here, I would not allow those same mistakes to be made, but I'll be able to guide the process to be able to facilitate that sustainability in developing this sector.
And Mr. Mills, talk to us a bit about how stakeholders are being engaged. And specifically, we are speaking like health professionals, community leaders, and well, policymakers, of course, to an extent, because, of course, while the legislation is very comprehensive and the vision was laid out, there are still some best practices, as you discussed, of course, that you would have encountered that you would be able to share. Talk to us about how those sectors are, those stakeholders, excuse me, are being engaged.
Yes, so through the same meetings that we have already scheduled, we are meeting with all connected ministries, Ministry of Health, National Security, the Attorney General Chambers, and basically just informing them of our intentions to build out this industry and explaining to them how we see an overlap, how we can collaborate, and then hearing their concerns, we are allowing them to express, give suggestions, and basically make it a collaborative approach to how we roll out. As you said, the act is already passed, but we still see that there's opportunity for us to make it better through amendments. So it is not set in stone as yet, and through consultation with Dr. Emanuel, we think that we can find ways to make it even better. And these stakeholder meetings are very insightful in that process.
Yes, and there are many opportunities also that presents itself from entering the medicinal cannabis framework. One of the examples is access for veterinary care, right? And this is a sector that we see is pretty much budding in the global space, and we don't want an investor to want to invest in the manufacturing of veterinary medicines from a local standpoint, not actually being granted that opportunity to do so just solely based on the legislative framework. So we want to ensure that no stone is unturned in terms of the prospects of economic development via the development of this sector, because this sector pretty much touches many aspects of human life, from health, from agriculture, from compliance, regulations, from manufacturing, processing. So we could see the diversification and the inclusion from a holistic standpoint to generate that wealth creation from locally commoditizing cannabis.
Standards are very important.
Absolutely. Yes, so the Medicinal Cannabis Authority, as I said, governed by the Cannabis Act, it is very clear on the standards, the testing parameters, the banned chemicals, the quality standards that is needed in this industry. But we're not stopping there. With the help of Dr. Emanuel, we're able to tap into best practices within the region, in Canada, the US, and Europe. He has a wealth of knowledge, and wherever we see high standards within the medicinal cannabis industry, we are going to tap into them and adopt the ones that we think will be beneficial to our local stakeholders and give them a competitive advantage for when they choose to enter into these international markets.
Yes, so I have engaged in the drafting, gazetting, publishing of numerous standards throughout the region. I have developed a cultivation, a manufacturing and processing and packaging and label standards for the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. And I have also recently developed the ITAL Standard Code of Practice for the cultivation of sacramental cannabis, right? So to understand the differentiation of cannabis for spiritual and religious purposes must be differentiated from the commercial prospects of growing cannabis commercially. So we understand standards is going to allow you marketability and access to various market points. So the adherence, the development, the enforcement of the standards is very prudent in the success and rollout of your industry, because it is what is going to develop that confidence confidence and also credibility from an international and from a consumer standpoint. So to have that standardized regulated framework could actually facilitate this sort of value proposition that we prospect for this industry moving forward.
Mr. Mills, is there, as you referred to, the number of engagements that Dr. Emanuel will be participating in while here, and of course, even when he leaves, there'll be ongoing engagements. Is there a list, a schedule of public events where persons can go as yet that you can share?
So we haven't published like a year-long outlook as yet, but we do have an itinerary for the 2 weeks that Dr. Emanuel is here. Mm-hmm. We have already set up social media, Facebook and such. So we'll be updating the public once these things are scheduled.
And how can they find that schedule? The Facebook you mentioned?
It is SKNMCA on Facebook.
Yes, and I will be delivering a public lecture next week, Tuesday, at 6:30 p.m. I will be focusing on how medicinal cannabis can be an economic driver for St. Kitts and Nevis. I also have public consultations with cannabis cultivators. That's on Monday. Yes. I also meet with the Rastafari community on Sunday. I also go over to Nevis to meet with cultivators there too. So I'll be sharing some of my research and looking at to educate the public as to what will be required of them willing to engage in cannabis production locally.
And with just about 2.5 minutes left, I'll ask you for final comments. And I think I would want to suggest it be along the line of persons coming out to engage and really have an open mind in terms of the information that's being presented. We'll start with you.
Yes, and I thank St. Kitts and Nevis for your kind hospitality, and I look forward to contributing in a meaningful way to roll out this industry. And I know it has very personal sentiments for particular persons who have been participating within the prohibition era. So what I can say, the future is yours, and let us look forward to a prospective future with cannabis in mind, but ensuring public health and safety and environmental stewardship is at the forefront of the management of this sector. Thank you.
Yes. So I just would like to echo the same sentiments as Dr. Emanuel, and just encourage everyone that, as I said, is interested in medicinal cannabis. Come out, check the Facebook page. You would see our next events. We'll be also traveling over to Nevis, so you're not left out. Come on out. This is a collaborative approach. Your suggestions, your ideas, your worries would be considered. Let's work together and get this done. You have my commitment as CEO that we will establish a thriving but safe medicinal cannabis industry.
Chief Executive Officer of the St. Kitts Medicinal Cannabis Authority, Navid Mills, Dr. Machel, Emanuel, consultant here with the authority. Thank you so much for joining us on this session of InFocus.
Thank you for having us, sir. Much appreciated.
We'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners, for being with us as well. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place, at the same time, for another edition of InFocus. Remember, we discuss your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.
Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.